Welcome to the first lesson in our first module, Creative Thinking. After completion of this lesson, you'll be able to understand and apply creative thinking, and understand and practice awareness of the cognitive foundations of creative thinking, including important related concepts such as cognitive blinders. Our lives and work have become more and more knowledge-based. With contemporary technologies, we have easy access to tons of information and data. Most people, though, don't really think about or question how they mentally process all this information. This is unfortunate because there is nothing more powerful than skilled thinking. If you are able to think effectively about a problem or task at hand, you save time and energy, avoid frustration and pain, and find better solutions faster. So how can you think more skillfully when faced with a problem? Creative thinking has become something of a buzzword and has often been referred to as the skill to have to solve problems. But what is creative thinking? And how does it work or not work? These questions and more will be the focus of this lesson. So, what is creative thinking? Thinking is creative when it leads to ideas that are both novel, things that others have not thought of before, but also useful, in that they adequately address the need, task, or problem at hand. But how does the process of creative thinking actually work? And how can you become a more creative thinker? According to Dean Simonton of the University of California, Davis, creative thinking is a process of variation and selective retention. These elements work together. The process of variation contributes to the novelty of an idea by giving you lots of alternative ideas, while the process of selective retention contributes to its usefulness by allowing you to choose the alternative that best solves the problem. With this understanding in mind, let's begin by exploring how one gets variation in their thinking. It's the first step in creative thinking, and where creative thinking usually goes wrong. The key to successful selective retention is to have lots of variation first. For that to happen, you, the creative thinker, need to have a wide variety of knowledge elements available that can be assembled into different combinations within your mind. This variation isn't blind or random, though. On the contrary, when effective, variation is guided, driven by an intimate understanding of what could be relevant to the task at hand. According to Teresa Amabile, a Harvard Business School professor, the extent of this variation depends on 1. The number of cognitive elements available for combination in the creative thinker's brain, 2. The breadth of those elements that are considered as relevant to the problem, and 3. Effective heuristics for combining those cognitive elements. In short, the key to coming up with novel ideas is to look for as many bits of knowledge that are related to your problem as possible. While this might sound simple, it's actually quite difficult, given that humans have underlying cognitive blinders that hinder our ability to maximize variation. What are cognitive blinders? According to Max Bazerman of the Harvard Business School and Dolly Hsu of NYU's CERN School of Business, cognitive blinders prevent people from seeing, seeking, using, or sharing highly relevant, easily accessible, and readily perceivable information. Cognitive blinders make it difficult to come up with the information you need to generate the most creative ideas. The first blinder, which is probably the most detrimental to creative thinking, is the failure to see information. In seeing information, focus is important, but it can make us less open to new inputs and perspectives. Let's have a look at an interesting example that highlights this blinder. In a famous experiment conducted at Cornell University, participants watched a video of 2 teams passing basketballs and were asked to count the number of passes between the players on one of the teams. In the middle of the video, a woman with an open umbrella walks among the players. In the original study, only 21% of the participants reported seeing the woman with the umbrella. The problem this experiment highlights is that when we focus intently on just one thing, we tend to miss lots of others. We often don't see information, potentially important information, even when it's right in front of us. That's cause for concern, since creative thinking requires staying alert to lots of inputs. The second blinder refers to the failure to seek information, another critical error we often make. A good example of this is the startup Juicero. They developed and launched a high-tech machine that took custom packets of fresh fruits and veggies and crushed them into juice. The company quickly fell out of favor when people realized that humans could just crush the packets with their own two hands to get juice and didn't need the $700 machine. The founder had proudly stated the machine had 400 custom parts and used 2 tons of force, and this excitement may have kept them from looking for information such as how much force was actually needed to crush fruits and vegetables in order to make a drink. When trying to come up with creative ideas, it's important not to just see what's right in front of you, but to actively seek out additional information that might be related to the problem you're trying to solve. Doing this is part of what you'll learn in this program. The third blinder refers to the failure to use information. This blinder is particularly problematic when our thinking has led to success in the past, as past successes often prevent us from using readily available information that could open us up to new possibilities. This happens a lot. For example, although Swiss watchmakers invented quartz technology, they didn't actually use it. Even after their discovery, they continued to incorporate the same mechanical technologies in their watches. Even as competitors that did use this technology picked up market share, the Swiss watchmakers failed to incorporate it into their products, and in short order, the majority of Swiss watchmakers went out of business. The final blinder is the failure to share information. Although we all know that working in teams is important in order to bring in different perspectives, backgrounds, and insights, a great way to ensure variation, research suggests that most teams fail to effectively leverage that diversity, simply because team members tend not to share information very well. Consider the parable of the blind men and the elephant. Because each of the blind men feels different parts of the elephant, none realize what they're touching. The man touching the trunk thinks it's a snake. The one touching the leg thinks it's a tree. The one touching the ear thinks it's a fan, and the one touching the tail thinks it's a rope. It's only when they share what they have felt that they're able to see the limitations of their own individual perspectives. Their variation of knowledge elements suffered mightily from their lack of sharing. These examples illustrate why variation matters in creative thinking. We need to see, seek, use, and share different bits of information if we're to arrive at a creative solution. Although avoiding cognitive blinders will allow you to get more variation, and by extension novelty, in your thinking, that's not the only element of creative thinking. We also need to consider the usefulness of our thinking if we want it to be creative. To do so, we need to use another thinking skill: selective retention. Selective retention is a matter of looking at the alternatives and picking out what you're going to try. You don't know for sure which one is best or which one your customers will want, but based on your judgment, knowledge, experience, and thinking skills, you move forward with at least one alternative. Researchers have written a lot about how this selection process works. It can be iterative, where ideas are examined, refined, and examined again. Sometimes in this type of selection process, you also adjust the basis behind how you're deciding. Testing your ideas can lead you to change what you're testing for. In other cases, creative thinking involves simply choosing the best among a list of alternatives. Either way, selective retention is a process of holding up the idea against how effective it is as a solution to the problem. There's one additional element to this. Selective retention begins in the mind of the creative person, but then proceeds with external testing. Per Teresa Amabile, this takes place with some social group. That external work is critical. After all this creativity, you're going to want to prototype and test your idea. and we'll get to those things later in the program. As we mentioned earlier, selective retention works when you have lots of creative, relevant knowledge elements to work with. That gives you a lot of options to choose from. Choosing from a short list isn't much of a choice. It's why those cognitive blinders are so problematic. To summarize, innovations come from creative thinking, because creative thinking is how you get ideas that are novel and useful. They're ideas that have impact. Creative thinking first involves variation, lots of different knowledge elements. Those must be seen as relevant and must be effectively combined. That leads to a series of ideas. Getting to those ideas, though, can be stymied by various cognitive blinders, the failure to see, seek, use, and share information. This creativity must then be accompanied with selective retention, a careful review of your various ideas before reviewing them with others. Then, once you select one, you move towards testing it. This lesson was designed to 1. Help creators get a sense of what creative thinking requires, variation and selective retention, and 2. Explain what can prevent you from getting that variation. This is the foundation for your work in the program. What's ahead? Well, in the rest of Module 1, we'll work on bringing our creative thinking to bear on solving a problem. In Lesson 2, we'll talk about how to get lots of knowledge elements that are focused on helping a customer. And in Lesson 3, we'll look at how to productively combine those knowledge elements so that you can begin your search for an innovative solution. The concept of effective heuristics for combining cognitive elements that we talked about earlier in this lesson. In Module 2, we'll use the process of selective retention to help you begin creating an innovative solution. We discuss brainstorming in Lesson 4, go through how to test your thinking in Lesson 5, and work on creating a proof of concept in Lesson 6. Finally, in Module 3, we will explain how to develop an innovation based on the creative idea you've come up with by going over co-creation processes, how to mobilize the resources you'll need, and lastly, how to promote your innovation.